Back when jelly hands wobbled under pumpkin lights and orange squash passed for a potion, Halloween was simple and brilliant. No fancy platters, no themed desserts, just chaos, sugar, and heart. Let's revisit the snacks that made those nights pure childhood joy. The king of Halloween snacks, toffee apples, were as treacherous as they were iconic. Every party table had them, glossy red or deep amber, perched proudly on wooden sticks. They looked perfect under the dim orange glow of jack-o'-lanterns, but one bite in and chaos began. The sugar shell cracked like glass, shards flying, and the toffee stuck to your cheeks, your teeth, your fringe. Basically everything but the apple. The tart fruit underneath balanced the sweetness, though no one cared. The fun was in the fight. There was always one kid who pulled out a wobbly tooth mid-bite and became a legend for the night. Sticky hands, candy-stained lips, and that distinct smell of sugar and apples. Nothing said Halloween quite like them. Even today, no supermarket version comes close to the thrill and mild dental danger of the homemade classic that left you both delighted and slightly traumatized. Monster Munch wasn't just a crisp, it was a badge of childhood chaos. Loud in crunch, louder in flavor, it owned the Halloween buffet. Pickled onion reigned supreme, that sour, face-twisting tang that somehow made you crave more. Cheese and flamin' hot were welcome too, but only if the shop had run out of the king. Poured straight from the family-sized bag onto paper plates, they disappeared faster than the jelly. Within minutes, kids' fingers were stained bright orange and sticky with pop spills, leaving prints on costumes, balloons, and walls alike. The shapes, claws or monsters depending who you asked, made them feel like food with personality. And when paired with a can of Panda Pops or a beaker of squash, you'd reached Halloween heaven. They weren't refined, they weren't healthy, but they were everything a spooky celebration needed. Noisy, messy, and brilliantly British. No Halloween party was complete without a plate of these chocolatey, crunchy masterpieces. Born from leftover cornflakes and a block of cooking chocolate, they were the homemade heroes of every school hall and kitchen buffet. Some mums added golden syrup for extra chew, others used margarine to stretch the chocolate further. But no matter the recipe, they vanished within minutes. Their uneven shapes and glossy surfaces were the mark of pure nostalgia. Kids grabbed them two at a time, bits of chocolate flaking onto costumes and plates. Sometimes they were decorated with a jelly worm or Smarties eyes for a spooky effect, though no one needed convincing. Their scent alone, rich, sweet, and slightly burnt, was enough to transport you back to plastic tablecloths and paper cups of orange squash. Chocolate cornflake cakes weren't fancy, but they were the soul of every party, cheap, cheerful, and made with love that tasted better than any shop-bought sweet. Tiny, wobbly, and gloriously homemade, fairy cakes were the stars of every Halloween buffet. From simple sponge batter and baked in mismatched paper cases, they came out uneven but perfect. What made them festive was the icing, slathered on thick, dyed the color of traffic cones, and sprinkled with black sugar or edible eyes. Some clever mums piped spiderwebs or bats, but most were proudly messy. You'd grab one between party games, take a bite, and instantly regret wearing vampire teeth. The icing stuck to everything, fingers, fangs, and faces. But no one cared. These little cakes were childhood in edible form, soft, sweet, and glowing orange under flickering pumpkin lights. They tasted of excitement, sugar rush, and home baking at its most chaotic. Long before cupcakes became fancy, fairy cakes ruled. Small, simple, and baked with love by every mum determined to make the night magical. No British Halloween party was complete without a bowl of wobbly jelly hiding something sinister. Usually bright green, red, or lurid orange, it sat center stage, glistening under the disco lights. A plastic spider, or if someone went all out, a rubber eyeball, waited beneath the surface to surprise anyone brave enough to scoop too deep. Of course, no one was actually scared, but everyone pretended to scream anyway. The texture was half the fun: slippery, wobbly, and impossible to eat neatly. Kids jiggled their plates, making it dance like it was alive, before gulping it down between fits of giggles. It was cheap, chaotic, and utterly essential. For a generation raised on instant jelly and packet mix, that sugary wobble was the taste of celebration itself. And while the fake spider usually ended up back in the bowl, the laughter it caused stayed long after the jelly was gone. If you were lucky, they were warm. If not, no one cared. Sausage rolls were the unspoken backbone of every Halloween buffet, flaky, greasy, and devoured faster than anything sweet. Homemade or shop-bought, they sat piled high beside bowls of ketchup and mustard, vanishing before the second round of games. Kids clutched two at a time, oblivious to the crumbs coating their costumes, while adults hovered nearby for a just one more. The pastry left fingerprints of grease on napkins, tablecloths, and pumpkin carvings alike. There was always debate over which brand or recipe reigned supreme. But really, they all tasted of pure party comfort. Buttery, salty, satisfying. No matter how many were made, there were never enough. Long after the sweets were gone and the music quieted, sausage rolls remained the truest symbol of a proper British party. Simple, familiar, and delicious even when cold. Every Halloween table needed a burst of radioactive orange, and cheesy Wotsits delivered it in glorious excess. One open bag and suddenly the air smelled of pure artificial cheese. The crunch was addictively loud, and the flavor, equal parts. Salt, corn, and neon powder was unforgettable. They stuck to fingers, vampire teeth, and paper cups of orange squash, leaving glowing fingerprints everywhere. Kids stuffed them by the handful, laughing through orange-stained grins, while parents sighed and reached for napkins that never helped. They were poured straight from the family-sized bag, usually into a plastic bowl that overflowed within seconds. The only rule? No double dipping if you'd already dunked one in ketchup. By the end of the night, the tablecloth, your hands, and your soul were coated in cheesy dust. It wasn't a party until someone spilled them all over the floor, and everyone still ate them anyway. Equal parts spooky and delicious, witches' fingers were a baking triumph for creative mums everywhere. Made from buttery shortbread dough, they were rolled thin and shaped into creepy little fingers, complete with almond nails and streaks of jam blood. The result was equal parts horror and delight. Grotesque to look at, but irresistible to eat. Some were baked until golden, others left pale and eerie. Kids squealed in disgust, and then grabbed one anyway. The shortbread melted in your mouth, the sweetness cutting through the jam's fake gore. Sometimes food coloring made them green or gray, just to push the horror further. Served on paper plates surrounded by gummy worms, they were Halloween artistry in biscuit form. Even after the party ended, the image of those severed, sugary fingers lingered, proof that British mums were both culinary geniuses and mild agents of chaos. A relic of every 70s to 90s buffet, the cheese and pineapple hedgehog somehow survived into every Halloween spread. A halved orange served as the base, bristling with cocktail sticks of cheddar cubes and tinned pineapple chunks, sometimes with a rogue pickled onion for mystery. It wasn't spooky, it wasn't seasonal, but it was tradition. Kids stabbed them straight from the hedgehog's cheeks, while adults hovered politely before demolishing the rest. The sweet-salty combination hit every nostalgic note, even if the concept baffled newcomers. There was something proudly British about it. The effort, the presentation, the total lack of logic. It stood proudly among neon jelly and sausage rolls like a crown jewel of vintage parties. Whether you loved it or mocked it, Everyone had one. By the end of the night, the orange base lay bare, cocktail sticks scattered like fallen swords. The hedgehog was gone, but never forgotten. Sticky, stretchy, and perfectly revolting, jelly worms were Halloween genius. Made by pouring wobbly jelly mix into straws or molds, they slithered out looking uncannily realistic, especially when dropped into bowls of chocolate mud or green jelly. Kids squealed, adults pretended to be grossed out, and everyone secretly loved them. Store-bought gummy versions were easier, draped dramatically across cupcakes, biscuits, or other kids' costumes when chaos took over. They stuck to everything: plates, fingers, tablecloths, and often ended up in hair before the night was over. The texture was equal parts horror and delight, squishy, chewy, and sweet enough to make your teeth ache. No matter how over-the-top Halloween parties became, jelly worms remained timeless, proof that the best treats were equal parts disgusting and delicious. They wiggled, jiggled, and delighted generations of kids who loved their sweets with a side of mischief. Homemade horror at its sweetest. Crispy cakes, whether made from cornflakes or Rice Krispies, were the foundation of every Halloween spread, but this version took it up a spooky notch. Each one was topped with Smarties or mini marshmallows pretending to be eyes, sometimes bloodshot with a drizzle of red icing. The result was charmingly dreadful, the kind of dessert that looked like a monster and tasted like heaven. The crunch of cereal mixed with melted chocolate or syrup made them irresistible, even when the decorations slid off halfway through the night. They were messy, cheerful, and vanishingly quick to disappear from the table. Every kid reached for one, leaving fingerprints of melted chocolate across the tablecloth. In a world of store-bought treats, these handmade monsters were pure magic, proof that creativity, sugar, and a bit of chaos were all you needed to make Halloween unforgettable. The Marmite of every Halloween buffet. Quite literally. Twiglets were the snack that divided the room. Someone's mum always brought them for the adults, imagining they added sophistication to the otherwise sugar-fueled chaos. Of course, the kids always grabbed a handful, expecting them to taste like crisps. The first bite was confusion. The second was betrayal. That burnt, yeasty tang hit like nothing else. A cross between toast and a chemistry experiment. Faces twisted, tongues stuck out, and yet somehow a few brave souls kept eating them, pretending to get it. Meanwhile, the grown-ups hovered, quietly polishing off the bowl between sips of lukewarm wine or squash. Love them or loathe them, Twiglets were a British party staple, the oddball snack that sneaked its way into every celebration. They were crunchy, stubbornly savory, and unapologetically weird. Proof that every good buffet needs one thing that tastes like it belongs to no one, yet somehow defines the night. Nothing said Halloween like those glowing cups of orange jelly, wobbling under the flickering light of a carved pumpkin. Poured into clear plastic cups and crowned with a dollop of squirty cream shaped like a ghost, or something close to it, they were pure, fleeting magic. Within minutes, the cream began to melt and slide, turning the ghosts into haunted puddles. Sometimes a gummy spider or a single smarty eye floated in the middle, an edible fright for anyone brave enough to dig in. Kids loved watching the jelly quiver on their spoons before devouring it in one go, laughing through sugar-smeared grins. They were simple, cheap, and delightfully chaotic. A creation that could only have come from a parent armed with instant jelly, a can of cream, and an overactive imagination. Sticky, bright, and utterly British, these jelly cups were the edible equivalent of a plastic ghost decoration. Gone in seconds, but fondly remembered forever. Party rings were the unshakable backbone of every British celebration, weddings, birthdays, and of course, Halloween. Their pastel icing didn't scream spooky, but no one cared. Arranged neatly on paper plates, they added instant color and crunch. Kids fought over the pink ones, pretending the orange rings were pumpkins and the purple ones were witchy. The glaze was shiny, rock-hard, and capable of cracking a tooth, but that was half the fun. They stuck to your fingers, your costume gloves, and occasionally your vampire fangs. Parents called them a nice, light option, but everyone knew they were just another excuse for sugar. Even when supermarkets tried to replace them with Halloween edition versions, nothing beat the classic rings. Simple, sweet, and proudly artificial. They survived decades of parties unchanged, and for good reason. Each bite was a taste of pure nostalgia, the sound of laughter, the rustle of crisp packets, and the unmistakable crunch of childhood joy. Half drink, half dare, Frankenstein's punch was a bubbling cauldron of chaos. No two recipes were ever the same. Some used green lemonade, others mixed every fizzy drink in the cupboard until it resembled swamp water. Floating jelly eyeballs, gummy worms, or ice cubes dyed red with food coloring bobbed menacingly at the surface. It was both horrifying and irresistible. Kids stared in fascination, daring each other to scoop out the eyeballs or drink the murky liquid without flinching. Served in plastic cups that bent under pressure, it fizzed and foamed in all directions, staining the table and your tongue bright green. Every sip was unpredictable, sweet, sour, or just plain strange. But that was the point. Frankenstein's punch wasn't meant to be refined. It was about theater, about laughter, about making something. Gross and sharing it proudly. It was the drink that united the table, a mad scientist's masterpiece of pure childhood fun. Only the most creative mums attempted them, and when they pulled it off, they became instant legends. Mini-bat sandwiches were slices of white bread, buttered and cut into Halloween shapes. Bats, ghosts, pumpkins, using cookie cutters borrowed from the Christmas tin. Fillings varied depending on what was in the fridge. Ham, cheese, jam, or even chocolate spread for the wild ones. They weren't perfect, the edges frayed, the shapes squashed, but no one minded. They looked brilliant on the table, especially next to bowls of jelly and crisps. The less ambitious parents just folded triangles and called them fang sandwiches. But it was the effort that counted. The first bite was soft, comforting, and unmistakably homemade. They might not have been scary, but they captured the heart of British Halloween. A bit silly, a bit messy, and full of charm. These sandwiches weren't just snacks. They were edible imagination at its best. The humble pink wafer transformed every Halloween into a moment of campy horror. Renamed witches' fingers, they were brittle, bright, and instantly nostalgic. Stacked neatly on paper plates, they broke at the lightest touch, scattering crumbs across costumes and tablecloths alike. Someone's mum always went the extra mile, sticking a green icing nail on the end or drizzling jam blood across the plate for effect. The flavor, that unmistakable fake strawberry sweetness, was both comforting and addictive. They were the snack you reached for absent-mindedly between games, and before long, the whole plate was gone. No matter how elaborate the rest of the food was, pink wafers always held their own. Their soft crunch and sugary coating were the taste of childhood simplicity, the quiet joy among the chaos of costumes and sugar highs. Delicate, delicious, and delightfully out of place, they reminded everyone that Halloween didn't need to be fancy to be fun. Equal parts creepy and creative, popcorn hands were a Halloween masterpiece straight from the school fair playbook. Clear plastic gloves, the kind used for serving food, were filled with buttery popcorn, each finger capped with a jelly bean, or sweet for nails. They looked terrifying on the table, yet everyone wanted one. The crunch echoed through the room as kids waved them around, pretending they were zombie hands before tearing into them. The mix of sweet and salty popcorn made them weirdly addictive, even when the gloves started sticking to your fingers. Some versions swapped popcorn for Wotsits or Skips, creating even brighter monstrosities. They were easy to make, impossible to eat neatly, and utterly brilliant. No modern Halloween snack pack will ever top the creativity of a parent who saw a box of gloves and thought, "That'll do." Popcorn hands were the perfect blend of fright and fun. Proof that British Halloween was always better homemade. No British Halloween party was complete without a bowl of chocolate eyeballs staring back at you. Wrapped in foil printed with bloodshot veins and eerie blue or green irises, they were cheap, creepy, and absolutely iconic. The foil crinkled as you unwrapped them, the sound echoing through the room like a tiny jump scare. Inside, the chocolate was cheap, sweet, and just the right side of chalky. But that never mattered. Kids stuffed their pockets with them, traded them like treasure, and occasionally used them as ammunition in sugar-fueled battles. The bowl always ended up empty, with stray foil wrappers glittering under pumpkin lights like leftover confetti. There was something perfectly British about them, mass-produced, slightly tacky, and yet utterly essential. They weren't fine confectionery, they were Halloween in edible form. One bite of that sugary chocolate, and you were instantly 8 years old again, cackling through plastic vampire. Fangs, grotesque, gummy, and gloriously over the top. Jelly body parts were the highlight of every October sweet shop trip. Bright red hearts, squishy tongues, wobbly brains, and green feet lined the pick-and-mix tubs like a mad scientist's lab. They looked disgusting, and that was the point. Kids loved daring each other to bite into the most revolting one, pretending to gag before grinning with sticky delight. The texture was pure chaos. Soft, chewy, and slightly slimy, often leaving red dye on your hands for days. Parents pretended to be horrified, secretly sneaking a few when no one was looking. Dumped into bowls beside the crisps or used as grisly cupcake toppers, they were cheap, fun, and perfectly unsettling. Every year, the designs grew more dramatic, but the taste never changed. That unmistakable gummy sweetness. Halloween wouldn't feel complete without them. A chewy reminder that the line between gross and great has always been deliciously thin. Cheese balls were the undisputed messmakers of every British Halloween buffet. Those neon orange spheres coated in cheesy dust were both irresistible and catastrophic. The moment the bag opened, the smell hit like a punch of nostalgia. Salty, synthetic, and undeniably perfect. They rolled across the table, bounced off plates, and somehow ended up in corners of the room you hadn't even reached yet. Kids grabbed handfuls, leaving glowing fingerprints on napkins, walls, and occasionally the dog. Adults pretended to hate them, but everyone knew they'd be munching on them by the end of the night. The cheese flavor was so fake it was brilliant, a crunchy, airy bite that dissolved into pure joy. And regret. Even days later, a rogue cheese ball would reappear under a sofa cushion, stale, but still faintly delicious. Sticky fingers, orange smiles, and laughter. That's what cheese balls brought to every proper British Halloween. Every October, crisp brands across Britain. Suddenly, everything went spooky. The flavors stayed the same. Cheese and onion, ready salted, pickled onion if you were lucky. But the shapes transformed into bats, ghosts, or pumpkins. Kids didn't care that they tasted identical to the normal ones. Somehow the shapes made them magical. The excitement started in the supermarket, spotting the limited edition bag with a cartoon vampire on it. At the party, they were poured into bowls that vanished within minutes. You'd grab a handful, trying to find a perfect bat shape before eating the lot in 2 bites. The crunch mixed with laughter, the wrappers crinkled like the autumn leaves outside. It was harmless marketing genius and pure joy for British kids. Proof that sometimes all it takes to make something festive is a new shape and a bit of imagination. No one remembers the flavor, but everyone remembers the fun. Cupcakes were the crown jewel of every homemade Halloween spread. Messy, colorful, and gone within minutes. They came in all shapes and sizes, baked by over-ambitious parents or kids who'd helped a bit too much. Each one was topped with a cocktail stick holding a paper ghost, sometimes cute, sometimes terrifyingly lopsided. The icing was piled high, orange, green, or jet black, with sugar sprinkles and the occasional jelly spider perched on top. The smell of vanilla and sugar filled the room as kids circled the table, picking out their favorites. The ghosts wilted, the icing slid, but no one cared. They tasted like joy, light sponge, sweet icing, and a hint of effort that made them all the more special. Some were undercooked, some slightly burnt, but every single one disappeared. Homemade, heartfelt, and completely chaotic, cupcakes with paper ghosts were the edible soul of British Halloween. Part dessert, part mad experiment, the Halloween trifle was an absolute spectacle. Layers of blood-red jelly, lurid green custard, whipped cream, and a few gummy worms thrown in for horror. It looked alarming, but tasted like heaven. The unsung hero of every British Halloween buffet, cold pizza. Always there, always gone before anything else. Usually left over from the adults' table or the night before, it arrived on a paper plate beside crisps and sausage rolls, still slightly greasy and utterly irresistible. Kids snatched slices between games, balancing them precariously while running around in masks and capes. There was something unbeatable about biting into a cold slice under dim pumpkin light, the tang of tomato and cheese cutting through the sugar overload. It wasn't spooky, it wasn't themed, but it was real. No matter how many sweets or gimmicks filled the table, cold pizza always disappeared first. It was the taste of the night winding down, of laughter still echoing, and of every British kid knowing. This, right here, was the best bit of the party. If you remember paper plates, plastic spiders, and the smell of toffee apples, you're one of us. Subscribe for more. Part dessert, part mad experiment, the Halloween trifle was an absolute spectacle. Layers of blood-red jelly, lurid green custard, whipped cream, and a few gummy worms thrown in for horror. It looked alarming, but tasted like heaven. Every parent had their own version. Some topped it with crushed chocolate biscuits to look like graveyard dirt. Others added plastic spiders or candy bones for extra terror. Scooped onto paper plates, it oozed across the table, half pudding, half chaos. Kids devoured it in spoonfuls, ignoring the aesthetics for the sugar hit beneath. The combination of flavors, sweet, fruity, creamy, and slightly synthetic, defined the essence of a British Halloween. It wasn't elegant or precise, but that was its charm. It was excess and imagination in one bowl, a perfect symbol of the night itself, colorful, messy, and far more delicious than it had any right to be. The unsung hero of every British Halloween buffet, cold pizza. Always there, always gone before anything else. Usually left over from the adults' table or the night before, it arrived on a paper plate beside crisps and sausage rolls, still slightly greasy and utterly irresistible. The cheese had congealed, the crust had gone chewy, and yet it was perfect. Kids snatched slices between games, balancing them precariously while running around in masks and capes. There was something unbeatable about biting into a cold slice under dim pumpkin light, the tang of tomato and cheese cutting through the sugar overload. It wasn't spooky, it wasn't themed, but it was real. No matter how many sweets or gimmicks filled the table, cold pizza always disappeared. First, it was the taste of the night winding down, of laughter still echoing, and of every British kid knowing. This, right here, was the best bit of the party. If you remember paper plates, plastic spiders, and the smell of toffee apples, you're one of us. Subscribe for more childhood throwbacks, and drop a comment. What's your best Halloween memory?